Hello everyone, my name is Irvin, also known as Koboman. Today we are continuing this series in talking about and using Computer Lab. This Computer Lab is provided by Microsoft. There is a link in the first comment on this video. So if you want to download this and follow along, I highly suggest you also watch the first video from this series to help you get set up. Though this is a continuation because of the people are requesting to continue making these videos. Today we are specifically going to talk about setting up a print server. This will also involve talking about DHCP, DNS, and everything else that comes along to making sure that the printers are working properly as they should be. All right, let's go ahead and connect to our domain controller, which is this virtual machine that we have going. So first thing first is to open up the print server under Windows administration tools. But if you look down here, this version does not have print server installed at all. And that's okay. We will go ahead and configure this. So just in case you are using the same version of the Computer Lab, you will not have printer server listed here under the domain controller server or virtual machine that we have running. But for those reasons, we need to run a server manager in order to set up and install a print server service on this server. This is something that you want to typically set up on a separate server, which can also be a virtual machine. Your entire company could be running off of a Hyper-V virtual machine that is a print server. You can certainly do this. I'm only redoing this here on the domain controller just so it's easier to continue with our class. All right, so let's go ahead and open up Server Manager. And this is the first thing you see, a dashboard. So what are we doing right now? We are creating a print server. So we have some options here, and it says, first option here, it says configure this local server. This has already been done. And if you look down here, because this is a domain controller, that means our domain is set up here as well. You can see things that are down here. AD, DHCP, DNS, file, storage, and services, and etc. These things are already done. So these are roles, right? These are the roles that we have assigned or created for this server, hence it's called Server Manager. So we already configured this. It says configure this local server. This is already done, and you can see that it's kind of highlighted. However, we are going to create another role, just like these are roles, DHCP, DNS, AD, and etc. Print server itself is also a role for a server. So we'll go ahead and select number 2 here where it says add roles and features. And we will select next here, and it says role-based or feature-based installed. This is what we want to do, so we will keep the option selected as there. Select next, and then here it says select the server from a server pool, and we'll go ahead and select the same server that we're using right now. This is the current server we're logged into. Again, it's the main controller, which is labeled DC1. That's the name of the computer, and here's our domain name, which is everything is part of the current server that we are using right now. It's all on the same computer. So no changes, select next. And here is where we need to find our print server or print services that we need to activate and install. This is very similar to some of the Windows versions that allow you to pick Windows features and stuff. Actually, I think all of them, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not 100% sure about the home version of Windows, but I do know regular version of Windows, and to me regular is Pro, Enterprise, and etc. will allow you to select Windows features. So this is very similar to that, except you're adding it to the server. So here we go. What are we doing? Well, we talked about print, right? Printing services. Here it is, print and document services. So we simply have to select that, and it automatically selects other things that we need to be part of this in order to function. And it, again, you can leave everything at default and select add feature. You can see there are other things here. The black box means that if I expand this, that means there is a part of file and storage services that are selected within this menu. You can see 2 out of 12, just so you know that what this black box means. So if I expand this, you can see that a couple of things are selected in here, file servers and storage services. That means that only some parts of these features, of these roles are selected, just to give you an idea of what you're looking at here and not just for me to move on. However, if you just see a check mark, under a menu, that means everything that's in there is selected. You can see this here that's already been applied and installed for DHCP and DNS servers as well, including obviously Active Directory domain services. So we will leave this here, and it's not grayed out yet because we haven't yet installed it, but we've selected it. We will install it and select next. So here we have on the next menu, we have a lot more options to add. And there are some things that, we can certainly add while we're installing the print server, but we want to stay on point, right? We are just talking about printing here. And for this, I want to actually select one more thing here, and it says here Internet Printing Client, and it gives you a description here. It says Internet Printing Client enables client to use Internet Printing Protocol, IPP, to connect and print to printers on the network or internet. And I want this option to be available for us whenever we are setting up or when we are connecting to network printers. So I will go ahead and select this. So that's a simple explanation of this. So I'll go ahead and select that as additional feature for our print server. All right. Here's just an overview of what we are doing and things to note. And it says here Windows Server 2022 supports print queues using either Type 3 or Type 4 printer drivers. So it simply is talking about different types of printer drivers. So these are just things to know, right? It says Microsoft recommends using Type 4 printer drivers when possible. And it tells you here with Type 4 printer drivers, users who are not members of the local administrator group can connect to the printer by default, and users on 32-bit clients can connect without a 32-bit driver on the print server. So basically what it tells you here, if you're using Type 4 or printer driver, which is the more advanced version of printer drivers, more people will be able to use this printer and be able to connect to it easier without having to use any outdated print drivers or any other prerequisites. So it's basically easier for users to connect and use these printers in a nutshell. I'll go ahead and select next to move on. I hope that was easy to follow. I really tried in my videos to make these things very easy to understand. All right, so here it is. Select the role service to install the for print and document servers. So here it is, print server. We have this checked, and it literally tells you here in the description, print server includes the print management snap-in, which is used for managing multiple printers or print servers and migrating printers to and from Windows Print Service. And we have other options here. We can briefly look at it. It says Internet Printing creates a website where users can manage print jobs on the server. It also enables users who have Internet Printing client installed to use web browser to connect to the web browser connect to print to shared printers on the server by using Internet Protocol. So I will go ahead and select this because this is something that I've added as an optional feature. So if you do a check mark on that, I'm just going to go back here. And if I do a check mark, you can see other features pop in. And these are all prerequisites required for Internet printing to work. So this is what I want. All right, go ahead and select next. And here is, again, this is just a web server computer is a prerequisite that is required for Internet printing. What it says here, default installation for the web server IIS role includes installation of role service enables you to serve static content. What this is telling you is that this is also going to install a web server. So you can have Microsoft based server host a website, and that's part of that Internet printing. So it has to install these prerequisites for this to work. So basically this prerequisite, which is called the web server IIS role, is a web server for website server that will run on this server as well. Select next. Again, here are the roles for the web server. I will just leave all this as default. You can customize this, but just to kind of keep things moving, I'll go ahead and just move on. You can certainly customize any of this type of stuff. Go ahead and select install. And now it is starting all of these installation. All right, here is our installation that is completed. It says installation succeeded on this server. I'll go ahead and select close. And now we have another role that has been set up and added to our server. So here it is under Server Manager. You can see print services. Okay, now that it's done, let's go ahead and go through our Windows Administrator tools and open up Print Management. Print Management is a place where you would configure your network printer, including the driver and everything else that comes with the printer that you're trying to install. All right, So let's go ahead and see what it looks like. Here is a print server. This is one of the first things you see. And here is DC1. And here are our printers. If you select printers here, you can see all the ones that are already in there. Now, obviously, these aren't real printers. These are just things that are part of Windows operating system. But here are some examples of what it would look like if you were to install a printer. In order to add a new printer, you can right-click in any of the blank areas here, select Add Printer, or you can select Action and select Add Printer. So let's go ahead and Add Printer here. And here is going to ask us to configure this printer. Now, we can specify what type of printer we can set up here, but there are some things we have to do before we can proceed. And this is shown by selecting Next on this next menu. And you can see here, this is a printer installation on the server, and it says pick an installation method. And you can select here to search for network printers. If you know that you have network printers that are already out there, chances are, if they are set to be discoverable, you'll be able to find them, but you may have a lot of them. So in order to do this manually, and the default is add an IPP, TCP IP, or web service printer by IP address or hostname. And this is why I wanted to install that IPP part of it, so that's an option for us to use in the future. I won't necessarily be setting that up in this video, but it's an option to have, so it's good to do these things while you're setting up the print server. Or you can set up using existing port. Means that there was a local printer installed. So if you have a local printer in here, it will show up. And chances are, it wouldn't just say COM port 1, 2, 3, 4, any of these type of stuff. If you have a local printer that's installed, you will actually show the name of it. We'll say HP or whatever it is that you're using. And that's not what we are going for. And here, the last option here is create a new port and add a new printer. All right. We are not doing that. We're specifically creating a network printer. So if I select Next under when I have this, when I have this select where it says TCP/IP network printer basically, and I select Next, here is immediately going to ask us for a host name or IP address. So do we have this type of information? We do not, right? So this is something that we have to do before we have to get this information, host name or IP address. We have to get it before we go through this part of setting up the network printer on the print server. So the printer itself has to be connected to the network ahead of this. So we'll go ahead and demonstrate on how that's done, all right? So obviously you would need this type of information. So let's go ahead and add HP network printer. We will go ahead and search for one so we can find it. There are things we need to do before we get this information. And every printer that you connect by default, it has a host name within the operating system itself, within the printer itself. Within the printer itself, it has a default host name set up. So what I'm looking for here is just an example of one of these printers. For example, here's this one here. This is just a typical older M605 HP printer. And if you kind of look closer here, you can see that it has an IP address right here and it says ready. You can tell that this printer here is already connected to the network by simply looking at this icon. And I apologize, I will go ahead and zoom in so you can see what the IP address for this is. And in order to get this to happen, we need to get a MAC address. MAC address is also known as a physical address, which is a combination of letters and numbers that every piece of hardware in the world has, that it's unique. And in this case, it's for the network adapter or network connection for this printer. Once we get that MAC address, we can go into our DHCP server and tell it to assign a specific IP address to that MAC address, to this printer. Okay? All right. So we'll go ahead and just role play this here. I need to now open up DHCP, which is same thing. You can just search for it, or you can go to admin tools and just find DHCP in here and select it to open. All right. So what we will do now is add a reservation on the network for that MAC address that we found on that printer itself. Now, obviously, I don't have an actual network printer to show you how it's done, but I will show you a screen of a login of somebody logging in onto that computer and finding the MAC address. You can also print. You can tell that same HP printer to print settings, configuration settings. It will tell you what the physical address is. It will literally say physical address and in some cases MAC address. But I believe for that M605, it will say physical address and it just prints it out on a piece of paper. So that's the information you would need, right? So let's go ahead and create a reservation. Here's our scope. Scope meaning on the DHCP, if you've never seen what DHCP server is, it's a server that assigns IP addresses to every device that's on that network. Scope means that it's there's a set amount of IP addresses available in this scope, meaning like literally when you concentrate on something, this is how many IP addresses we have in our pool, in our address pool. And that's what that means, and it's set in there. Anyways, to move on, here are reservations. And right now, there's nothing under reservations. If we right-click reservation, select a new reservation, we can create a reservation for our printer. And we need that MAC address, which we will insert right here. So let's start with a reservation name. I'll go ahead and call it HP printer. And I will specify the IP address I want. So you have to look for available free IP addresses that you have in your scope. This is why I talked about scope. This one here starts with 10.0.0.0. So I have plenty of them. And for example, I can see what the IP address of this server is, just to give you an idea of how they look like. If I just go to command line and just type in ipconfig and I just simply hit enter, it tells me that the server is using 10.0.0.6, right? So obviously I can't use this one here, and probably anything else that is below this, meaning 1 through 6, right? So, but I can go to 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever else is available, right? So for those reasons, I will pick next available address. So I will type in 0, 0, and then 7. So this is what I will use. All right. So that's the IP address I will assign to this printer, and the MAC address. And I'll give you an example of what MAC address looks like. And when you type them in, you don't want any dashes or spaces. Matter of fact, let's go back to here and just find the MAC address picture just to show you. Here's an example. Here's a printout that I was telling you about. Here's the hardware address or MAC address. And well, it's blurred out here, but this is the printout it would come up as. I think I said it would say physical address, but sometimes it does say hardware address. And this shows here for Wi-Fi and IP version 4, so that printer has both, which you can do for both. Here's an example here for this one here, hardware address, and it's this one, 0030C1. So let's go ahead and type that in into our print server. All right, 0031C1, and literally like this, 3173, okay, 3173. Make sure you're accurate on this. And what is that, 9F? All right, 9F. And I'll go ahead and specify description. And if you want to set up, say, in the description, you can say what the location is too. For example, let's say it's in HR. Sure, why not? For support types, we want both DHCP and BootTP, so that's perfectly fine. So if I select add, this just means when it turned blank, that means that it accepted. Otherwise, you would get an error and say either this unique identifier is being used, or the MAC address is being used already, it's already in the system, or it would say the IP address you're trying to add is already been reserved. All right, so we're good there, and it's a good thing that it has those errors. I'll go ahead and close this, and now we can see our reservation right here, or if I expand the reservations here, you can see now that we can actually expand it and see this reservation. So what's going to happen is, if I select address leases, this here where it says inactive, and as soon as this printer connects, it will say active. That way you know that your printer is now online and it has a specific IP address that you've assigned it to. All right, so now we have that. And we can now go back and set up our printer when we go back and say add printer, and then it's same menus, add an IP, TCP IP, next. Now we can specify our printer name. For this, actually, I will go ahead and set up TCP IP device. I will go ahead and type in our IP address that we've used, which is 10.0.0.7. And this will work, right? This will work. It will find this printer. However, you don't necessarily want to do this. You can set it up like this if you want to, and that's fine. It will work. But if you just want to use a host name or a computer name or a printer name, then you would have to set up a DNS record that would indicate what that printer host name you want it to be. And it's going to be on DNS. The printer itself, if you log into it, let's say you log in here and you're looking at the settings within the printer, the host name can say whatever. It doesn't matter what it says there. You are in control when it comes to DNS, means the main name services on your network, to what your device, to what you want your device to be called on the network and recognized as. So what we're going to do, we will come up with the name that we want to use this printer for, and we will tell it that its address, its IP address is at 10.0.0.7. And that's the point of DNS, so we don't have to remember, the IP addresses if you have, thousands of IP addresses. So under Windows Admin Tools, we know we have DNS installed as a role on our computer. We saw on our server. We saw that previously. And here it is. Here is our DNS, domain name service. And we will go ahead and create an entry that will tell it what the name, what we want our printer to be identified as for that IP address. All right, and then if we expand corp.contoso, we can see on the right, and this is our domain controller, we can see on the right some of the clients that we already have that we've seen in previous video, like client 1, which is a regular computer, and here is an automatically created DNS entry for its IP address, and we can see that its IP address is .100. Same thing for our content management server, which is named CM1, and it has the same IP address that we just talked about, which is not good, right? That reservation should have been already set up in the DHCP server, but at least we know that we can't use this, so we need to go back and to our DHCP server and change that reservation to different IP address. So we'll go ahead and go to properties here, copy our MAC address because we need it, and we need to delete this reservation here because we need to use a different IP address for it. So we'll go ahead and recreate it, new reservation. I've copied my MAC address, so I don't need to remember it. Now let me just double check my DNS server just to make sure. And you would usually double check this. These reservations for this content management server should have been in our DHCP server, and it's not, which is not good, right? But at least we can check to see if anything else. It doesn't look like anything is using .11. So let's go ahead and use that and create a reservation for .11. Okay. Reservation name, HP printer, HP printer in HR. Okay. All right, that worked. Go back to our DNS entry, and here we will create one. So let's go ahead and create our pointer or our record. So right click anywhere in the blank area, just like for the reservations, and select new host, and we will specify, and here is where we can call it whatever we want. It's going to create a fully qualified domain name for it. So HR printer. This is what I will call it. So instead of having to remember what dot where the printer is, which is a dot 10.0.0.11, now I can just say, well, I want to install HP printer, because this is going to be its fully qualified domain name, meaning that it's going to be able to be reached on this domain by using a name, just simply HR printer. So if somebody wants to add it, they can now use just HR printer name to add a printer to their computer. Again, we switched over to using .11 because a different server is using .7. We can't use that for reservation, so we have .11. Select add host. Okay, the host record printer was successfully created. All right, so that's forward. You can also do this for reverse lookup as well if you'd like, but for now we're just going to leave it at that. So now we know it's no longer 7, but we don't have to worry about this anymore. We don't have to type in IP address. We can just forget about it. It's easier to remember just to call it HR printer. Okay, and here it says auto detect printer drivers to use. That's perfectly fine. You can certainly do that, and it will give you an option or options of what printer drivers, and you can use multiple printer drivers. You can switch between them later if one of them is causing issues. But in this case, if I select next, there is no actual printer obviously connected to this system right now. So it will error out, but for us to move on, we'll go ahead and see what happens. Okay, so obviously it didn't find it, but we can kind of cheat it here, and we can just specify that it's a generic network card, and just so we can kind of move on to get to configuring the printer that we are going to use. All right, and here it's asking us to install a new driver. We can use an existing driver if we have it available, and you can select any of these here, or we can select our own custom driver that we've downloaded directly, let's say from HP. And let's go ahead and just kind of pretend that we're doing that, and we'll go ahead and select just kind of a generic one. But if you download them, right, if you download them from HP, you will have an option to select it, and you can find it by selecting have disk. And once you do that, you can search through and point to it. You can say, well, this is the HP driver I want to use, and on the left side here it will say HP, right? It will say HP. But for this, we're going to pretend that we're using Microsoft, right? Just so we can move on. But here's an idea of what kind of drivers you will see. Even from HP, you will see this one, Microsoft PC L6 class type of driver, or PS. These are the most common ones that I've seen being used, and even not just on HP, but for example, like a Ricoh type of. Ricoh is like a name brand for a printer that's pretty popular nowadays. So I'll go ahead and select this PCL6 driver, select next. So these are some of the descriptions of what it looks like to the people that are adding it. And it says you can give the printer a friendly name and the specific, and specify whether the people can use the printer, right? And here it is, you want to make sure that it's select to share this printer so that people can see it on the network. And you don't necessarily have to do this where it's visible, but it's highly recommended, and why not, right? And I will call this one printer name HR printer, and this one can have spaces in the name. It's not a domain, it's not a name, it's not a host name for a printer. All right, so share name is HR printer HR, and you can specify other things if you want. So here it is. This is the name. This is how users will see the printer whenever they search for it. This is how they would see it, as a name, not as the way you would add it. This is as a name that would show up whenever it's added. All right, next. All right, finish. All right, so here it is. Here is our HR printer, and if we right click it here within the print server, go to properties, we can change things. And this is important to know. We can change different drivers later on if you want. So if I go to advanced here, you can see that I've selected this one, PCL6 driver. But if I want to choose a different one, obviously I can add a new driver later, or I can select the one from the existing ones that we have in here already, right? So again, you can have multiple drivers. You can add them in there. This is really simple. And the point of it is so that if you have any issues with one driver, let's say it's printing weirdly or not doing this or that, you can switch over to a completely different driver, which could fix your issues. Now, you can also, and this is not necessarily advised to do from security point of view, but you can select here to keep printed documents. What this will do, it will give you, it will save all the print jobs that come through this printer. So everything is being printed. You can see it in there still. It will still stay in the memory, so that way you can reprint it or can see what's being printed. As administrator, you can view these things. Now, you don't want to necessarily keep this checked here all the time, because if there are too many of them, it can cause issues with the print server itself, right? So if you're only troubleshooting things, then I would click and select that, and then you would see jobs in the queue here, and it would say how many print jobs are coming through. And that's one other thing, right? You can see the print jobs, how many, what's the usage of this printer, and you can do that again if you go to properties and go to advanced and select keep printed documents. It will keep track of how many jobs are being printed. So if that's what you want to do, you can certainly do that. And yeah, again, all the things that we've just talked about, we can change. Again, with sharing ports, here is something that if you want to reroute the printer, let's say this printer is bad, it suddenly breaks, and people need to print right away, right? They need to switch. We need to switch them over to another printer. Let's say a printer that's nearby. Let's say there is a second printer in HR called HR Printer 2. You can route all the print jobs to that. So this is the point of ports here. You can uncheck this here or switch over to a different one. You wouldn't uncheck it. You just switch it over to a different one. And you can then route jobs to that while the other one is being fixed, while the other one is being worked on. So that's pretty cool to know when it comes to ports. That's all that it is. These are printer ports, meaning that other printers that are on the network, you can select one of them to route the jobs so that you can fix HR printer if it's being broken, right? So that's pretty much it when it comes to the setup of this. Those are the things you need to have set up. Now, depending on your work environment, this and that, there may be more to it, right? For example, I work in a medical field, for IT in a medical field, and there are a lot of other things that need to be set up, special way of printing, this and that, and it's a lot more complicated than this, right? So, and obviously I can't show you any of this stuff because, obviously I don't want to get fired, you know what I mean? So, but I hope this is helpful. I hope this is a nice refresher for people who want to get back into IT or just need to brush up on things, or people who are new to IT and want to learn this stuff. I hope it's easy to understand. That's my really main goal for these type of videos, is for them to be easy to understand. All right, I wish you best of luck. Again, if you haven't watched the first video, I highly suggest you do. And I got other videos on this. And also let me know in the comments if you want me to make more or continue making videos using this Microsoft Lab, computer lab that we have going. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.